Hello folks, well this is Miguel from the Embargo Man channel. So what we're gonna do today, and we're gonna talk something about something very serious about this. I mean, what you hoping for in all of the evidence. Let me tell you why. I have made a short video that I promise you that I'm gonna make a video that is going to be wild. Alright? Telling you about 2025 and 2026 and beyond, right? So what would happen is these documentaries is very important to see. You gotta see the fatal flaw. I mean, a DW documentary on YouTube, right? If you watch those, all right, so it tells about the Boeing 737 Max, right? This is very important because I believe is going to happen again. Why? Because let me tell you what, these documentaries are so important to see. And then those frontline documentaries, The Fall of Boeing, that have two parts. I mean, about the MCAS and about the falling door, right? So there was having people from the New York Times and so talking about an investigation with Boeing and stuff. Um, there was a guy that are trying to investigate about Boeing, right? So there's one part about it, but then in the future you're gonna see a different part where family members of Mexican victims, all right, family members of Mexican victims will call out in a way to proceed about what would it take to protect a company like Boeing, all right? So it's gonna cover up things like that, blaming foreign pilots, but this time they're gonna blame Mexican pilots for drinking at the cockpit, right? So and there's two other documentaries to be very important: Fatal Flight on Amazon, and the one that I tell you to recommend to watch it again, Downfall. All right, Downfall. You know how the case against Boeing. It had very epic proportions, and this is when do you think the president that you voted for? No, the U.S. didn't. Were the last on the bus to ground Boeing planes, right? And why? Because what happened in there is always going to silence the whistleblowers. All right, so I mean, put it this way, and I see the 60 Minutes how Boeing has cut corners, all right, has been cutting corners since then. They have been changing two CEOs or three CEOs from Dennis Muhlenberg, who walked away and pled not guilty on 316 and 308. I mean, the Ethiopian and Lion Air crash. I mean, I seen this and it's terrible how, and you for other family members, anybody who were the victims of those plane crashes, you better be aware, because I believe I do not trust 100% of what Boeing executives are doing. What they're going to do is they're going to do what is worse. All right. So what happened? John Barnett, that worked in Boeing company, and it says about the merger with McDonnell Douglas. McDonnell Douglas is another competitor. All right. Quality issues are going here and there, right? So this is where the quality issues went there just from the start, right? Just from the start. I mean, so I'm talking about airplanes falling from the sky, whatever. I have seen it all, right? So in that case, when that scenario has happened, it would it would be fantastic for Boeing, right? So put it that way, Boeing never noticed about a foreign competitor. This is like, okay, what would the same thing with the auto industry? Why does European and Asian rivals has coming? Same thing with that. Airbus, on the other hand, was giving Boeing a run for its money. And why is this reason why, right? So it's a multinational based in Europe that make airplanes in France, Germany, um, Mobile, Alabama, and China, right? So it would be settled in that this is where the nightmare for Boeing will start, right? So what would happen in there, right? So this is how it start, and let me tell you why Airbus will do better, even foreign competitors, but for all these years, why Airbus would do better and gain more value, or their stock prices for Airbus do better than Boeing. Let me tell you why, right? Suddenly is this about about cutting corners at the FAA. There was other crashes of other planes not related to a Boeing, right? So whatnot. I still believe that Boeing are still gonna have making faulty planes, even though I rode in a Boeing 777, seeing my dad. I'm okay. I rode in these in 787 from Ecuador, 737 Max back row, but from my trip to Colombia, if they have Emirates, right? Emirates do have Boeing and Airbus, right? So putting about that, the flight is awesome and everything like that, but I feel the dangers of what would happen. What would happen with this? This is already been happening. Every time when John Barnett has did tell the truth, I mean, all the evidence of that. I mean, they were calling John Wicks to do the job, all right? Or right? In other words, they were calling a hitman, right? So the hitman would definitely, I mean, went, and this is just went. They went to John Barnett's pickup truck and they pretend that he committed suicide. Bullshit, BS. What they did is the hitman shot shot John Barnett. And then there's gonna be another investigator, right? Somebody investigate, telling the truth about it. So that is another whistleblower caught in the scene was poisoned, right? I mean, evidence is even Peterson might end up in a jail in El Salvador, because why I'm gonna tell you why he's gonna end up in jail in El Salvador is for telling the truth. All right. So why is gonna be this? All right. The situation of all this, and that I could tell you not just Peterson that I believe that he's going to end up in a jail in El Salvador. What's going to happen is, I mean, there was discussion with Alan Ortberg and Donald Trump about about transfer or shifting production of some parts in Mexico, right? Some parts in Mexico, right? So yeah, they haven't outsourced parts from other countries like Japan and stuff, right? So the matter of fact is to keep production here, but the focus is on some faulty parts made in the US, cutting cost, cutting the corners in there, make them low grade quality, so these unsafe planes to be flown, you know. All it is to give credit that most likely the airplanes that are unsafe to fly would be from airlines from Latin America and Africa and in lower great parts of Asia. Why? Because so the CEO could gain presidential medal of freedom for killing foreign nationals and blame foreign pilots for for drinking or something like that. Why it works that way? You know why? Okay, I mean the CEO of Boeing have more rights and more freedom than an undocumented immigrant. Why? Because once he made faulty airplanes and the airplanes fall in a Latin American country, and then, for example, passengers from Mexico dies, he gets more credit and deserves more of his freedom compared to an undocumented immigrant who might be come from Mexico. Has more right. The CEO of Boeing murdering people has more rights than an undocumented immigrant. That's the truth, right? A whistleblower, on the other hand, has the danger to being sent to a foreign prison. Let me tell you, a foreign prison or Alcatraz. I mean, Alcatraz will be set up for the Boeing whistleblowers, and they're gonna copy the same, remodel it. They're going to be very, very, copying the CCOT, right? They're gonna copy the CCOT, right? Either way, well, it's gonna be like that. I mean, what's gonna happen with all this, right? So from now to 2009, I mean, what's going to happen in this is like what would test is this. Maybe a very popular YouTuber get ready for somebody. I'm not saying the Japan trip, but a trip to South America, a trip to Colombia. All right. I mean, put it just a minute if you are in Japan, safe or something like that. Put it just a minute. A Boeing 737 Max 10. I'm gonna tell you that the MCAS is there. I mean, or Max 8 or whatever, brand new plane, right? So I mean, it is for the airlines to have it. Even Delta has a line set for 737 Max for 2026, right? In that case, it would be under the president, you know, term, right? Under the president of Colombia terms, right? Petro's administration, all right? So what would happen is that this popular YouTuber, right, decide, okay, I'm gonna go to Colombia, right? Going to Colombia, right? So the plane is there, right there in that final moment. You will see the plane could crash, right? The plane crash, the same plot as what has happened in Lion Air, right? It's going to be a flight from Delta as I could imagine. And after that, the US will not be the first country to ground the 737 Max, right? And then they go into, and then this president that we have now is going to call the president of Colombia right now, pretty soon, like, favors China instead of the United States. Well, that would be the first country to ground the plane. Then after that, after whoever it is, I'm just going to say the name in all. and then that popular YouTuber is gonna make a video crying out loud that says, this is not it. This is impossible. She was said, I miss Jenna. I miss Jenna. Jenna never been in that plane, and that plane crash. Maybe I'll be there in the funeral, but then, I go travel to Colombia. But from now on, I hope I'm not gonna be in that Delta flight. I'm gonna freaking risk my life in a 737 Max, right? If I'm dead in that plane, well, nah, I'm not gonna risk that. Forget it. I'm not gonna risk that. But yeah, the risk would be most likely of all this, and then the court would say, oh, the guy flying the airplane was smoking weed, was smoking marijuana, was high. Well, he was a stone pilot, right? So it's a stone pilot that flew a Delta flight that crashed in Colombia, right? So just for saying that, then there are gonna be other flights, not just the 737 Max, right? I mean, and I do believe about and I do believe about John Barnett being right. I believe John Barnett in a heartbeat. I believe him. And for you members that you lost the family members in Lion Air and in Ethiopia, it's going to happen, and you don't but trust. All right, what is MAGA stands for? All right, I would say this: make Airbus great again. Why? Because I will tell you what's going to be the accidents, right? So the next flight would be two planes, two Boeing planes. One from Aero Mexico, a 787 with a busted fuel tank. It drips all the fuel, that plane with a busted fuel tank, and loses control. When it loses control, boom, it crashed somewhere around Cancun or the Mexican Riviera, right? Majority, you have tourists and everything from other countries, but the majority would be Mexican nationals, right? Then another 737 Max, it would crash somewhere around Guadalajara or around Mexico City, and this is the MCAS thing. And then what would happen? I mean, there might be a court in Miami, right? Favors Boeing and everything like that. What is going to happen is that I mean, there might be some whistleblower or somebody inside there, maybe Rick Morales, somebody like that, in there in the Miami courtroom, right? So what's going to happen is they're going to test this. That they're going to say that the airplanes are fine, even though it's BS. But some of you believe, right? Some of you who voted for President Trump, you're going to believe pilots from that country are alcoholics, or pilots from Mexico are known for alcoholic pilots. Why? Because you believe so. Why? Because you know who said so, right? So that way, being discredited by the FAA and stuff, I mean, you ignore the busted fuel tank. You're going to ignore the MCAS, right? So what was gonna happen is about the drunken pilots, the drunk Mexican pilots, and just to have a scapegoat to protect Boeing's flaws. And then the truth would says, no, the planes were faulty, right? So this is where it goes. The planes are faulty. Couple of whistleblowers are going to end up in El Salvador. Peterson will go to jail in El Salvador at CCOT for telling the truth, right? So, I mean, this is it, right? So, the one that is only free, the free man, it will be the CEO of Boeing, has more rights, has more freedom than anybody else. It has more freedom than regular Americans. It has more freedom than um an undocumented immigrant. Why? Because he murders Mexican nationals and all, turn them into profit, earns the Presidential Medal of Freedom, and what is going to happen is that is going to be called a true American hero. For what? For saying that the scrutiny for Boeing is that once the CEO is pled not guilty, was going to happen, Claudia Sheinbaum from Mexico would not buy Boeing planes. Aero Mexico would cut ties with Boeing, and Airbus, on the other hand, might plan to build A320s in Mexico near Monterrey, right? So the plane would be, this is the biggest blow on Boeing. So once the plane built in an Airbus factory near Monterrey, Mexico, will be the first Airbus A320 built. Is gonna be the biggest kick in the balls for Boeing. Why? Because it's gonna settle in with all this. The first thing is Alabama is going to export a lot of their A320s going to Mexico, right? That's the first phase. Then the plan of whatever it is, once Airbus built their airplanes in Mexico, then the ties up and they're not buying American made airplanes, then tariffs about a 12 pack of Corona beer is gonna cost $100. Tequila will cost more than cognac, and all of a sudden 200% tariffs on Mexican goods. You know why? Because of an airplane crash. I mean, 3 Boeing airplane crashes. One in Colombia, and a YouTuber's crying out, "Oh, white Jen is dead" or whatever. The second one, a busted fuel tank in another 737 Max. 2 would be from Aero Mexico. One is gonna be crashing Colombia on a flight from Delta. Why? It's going to be like that, right? So after all this, Airbus would gain more money from 2025, 2026, and beyond until 2029. And the FAA won't be trusted. Or what we do is that airplanes that would gain the Guinness World Record, a company could get the Guinness World Record of most airplane crashes, would be approved by the FAA to be safe to fly, right? So, in the other hand, Airbus would have the upper hand, and there's other competitors, Comac in China, Mitsubishi or Honda from Japan. It will take the company to the fate of a Dutch aircraft manufacturer named Fokker, right? This is where it's going on. The first thing they're gonna send is whistleblowers, all right? I mean, they're gonna reopen Alcatraz and they're gonna make it Seacot style, right? remodelize, making CCOT style. There's people who are gonna go train in CCOT. First of all, about the whistleblowers going to CCOT, right? It's gonna be American-born nationals being sent to El Salvador, right? Covering up, saying that pilots from Mexico are alcoholics, Delta pilot smoke weed, and and whatever it is all to be covered up and using scapegoats for this, all right? Though, I mean, Peterson will be arrested after these plane crashes, and he's not going to jail in America. He's going to be sent to El Salvador for telling the truth, right? So I'm saying there, right there, look, if I tell the truth now, you know what? I mean, this is what it is. I'm just gaining the subscribers I need in embargo, man. So before you take any flight or anything like that, once you go into a flight to Mexico, make sure to check the manufacturer. Make sure that you are safer bet in an Airbus aircraft, or an aircraft made by another company, Airbus for now, right? So what it is about all this, the scrutiny of safety is, and I could tell you what, this is Boeing's nightmare, seeing an Airbus A320neo being built in Mexico. I mean, this is the worst nightmare for Boeing, because what it is about corporate greed, that they find out that they're saying, oh, Presidential Medal of Freedom after killing 300 plus people, Mexican nationals that are ones that are the victims that are gonna get screwed over. And you know what? And whistleblowers telling the truth will be sent to jail. Even you're gonna see Peterson going to jail to El Salvador. And that's how it works, all right? I mean, this system right now, if you think about it, you believe that you voted for a person that pilots from Mexico are known for alcoholics, that a person that flew a plane from Delta smoked weed just to cover things up. But people, and then you tell these guys are treason. They're for treason, right? They're treason. They're going against America, right? Paying $100 for a 12 pack of Corona beer, right? And then you gotta regret it if you have a family member or somebody going to a flight and die in a Boeing. You're going to regret your vote, because you are protecting somebody that is protecting corporate greed, right? A person that do this flaws, who pretend to says, okay, he earns a Presidential Medal of Freedom for what? For killing foreign nationals, for blaming foreign nationals flying drunk, to say that the planes are fine. And most of all, just to have the CEO who has killed 300 plus people, who is from Boeing, to have more freedom, more of his rights, not playing guilty, called a hero, because he has more freedom than any regular American or everyday Joe, or than any people who is an undocumented immigrant from Mexico or Central America, or whichever the countries that are easily to be deported. That's the person who has most rights in America right now. And for in that case, why does Airbus would make money? It also follows along the way of this pattern. most likely Airbus, in the other hand, would have this, this is more set on the middle, that Japan in their aviation industry is going to be either Mitsubishi or Honda. Airbus, on the other hand, will have South Korea's aviation. They're going to have a merger between Korean aerospace industries and Airbus to create Airbus Korea. South Korea, on the other hand, will be another country that Boeing would lose ground. Airlines like Air Korea, like Korean Air, and others based in South Korea will have Boeing lose those customers to Airbus after the formation of Airbus Korea. This is similar to like GM acquiring with Daewoo, and they call it GM Korea. Yeah, that's gonna happen. It's gonna happen like that. I mean, Boeing is going to lose in Mexico. They already lost in China because of, tariffs. But in the safety concerns, they're gonna lose to Mexico. Aero Mexico cut ties right away. I know Mexicans how they feel about it. They cut ties with Boeing in a heartbeat, and then manufactured, and put it that way, A320 being built in Mexico is gonna be Claudia Sheinbaum and Fox, former President Fox, given the shots these Airbus are better than the piece of shit Boeing. All right, and whatnot. South Korea, on the other hand, if Boeing lose trust, right, the Korean aviation industry will be led by a European company. We all know it's Airbus, and they're gonna make in Sashion, South Korea is where they're gonna start. Yeah, Airbus would make more money in South Korea. They're gonna buy zero Boeing planes. All right, so what's going on in there? The most important is watch Downfall on Netflix. Watch Fatal Flight on Prime. Watch the Boeing's Fatal Flight. The fatal downfall from Boeing in the front line, because they're gonna have one about the doors falling off and all that stuff in the frontline videos about Boeing, right? Just watching these documentaries, and you're gonna see one about somebody who is a party, Jorge Ramos or something like that, losing somebody to a Boeing plane in a crash in Mexico, because the Mexico crashes are gonna add up too. So, well, after all, thanks for viewing Embargo Man channel. I'll wait for you for a next video. It's gonna be something else. Stay tuned and be safe. Be safe, because, for God willing, where are you gonna go? You're gonna go to the afterlife, or you're gonna go to the heavenly kingdom? I don't want you to go take a flight directly to heaven or hell. All right, so how do you compromise? But please take care of yourself. Stay safe. So see you in the next video on Embargo Man. Hit the bell and please subscribe. It's very important to know that I made this video, because it is very, very, very important. That's the reason why. Goodbye, folks.